Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for showing up. I'm sure we're going to have some more people coming on, but we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to This Is CDR. My name is Chris Neidl. I am the co-founder of OpenAir, and today I am subbing as co-host for Toby Bryce. So very excited to have everybody here. And so I'll just give you a little bit of background before we get into today's program with DrawDAO. For those of you who aren't familiar with OpenAir puts on This Is CDR every Tuesday. And this is an online event series where each week we look at exploring different examples of a wide range of carbon dioxide removal solutions by talking to subject experts and entrepreneurs who are actually driving those solutions forward in the real world. And OpenAir itself, again, for those of you who are new to it, we're a distributed volunteer network that is focused on advancing carbon dioxide removal solutions in the real world through what we call missions. So I know Megha is going to drop some links there where you can take a look at our website, and you can also join. We now have members on every continent, and we're a very, very active community based on Discord. And it's worth saying up front, really important to stress, is that while OpenAir and the missions that we work on are focused on negative emissions and carbon dioxide removal, we see carbon dioxide removal as part of the overall necessary needs that we have to address the climate emergency. And carbon dioxide removal is one part of that. The science is very clear that in addition to decarbonization as rapidly as possible and adaptation to inevitable climate change, we now have so much emissions in the atmosphere that we will have to remove some significant quantities over the coming decades and for the remainder of this century. And for those, I know Megha will drop some links right now. We have some great resources that you can see that are actually on our website for people who are at all levels of learning about CDR, from beginner to advanced. And one that we really strongly recommend, which is really sort of essential reading here within the OpenAir community, is the excellent carbon dioxide removal primer, which I think was published about 1.5 years ago. It's free to read online and very readable, actually. And Megha will drop a link to that. So before we get into today's discussion, which we're really excited about with Charles Van Tassel from DrawDAO, I just want to give just a couple of announcements around some other content that we've developed in the community. Some of you are probably familiar with our This Is CDR spinoff, which we call CDR Horizons, which is hosted by two of our members, Charles Yang and Harsh Sanghi. And this program, which we release new episodes on YouTube every 2 weeks, really focuses on new and emerging research that's happening in and outside of academia that may change the direction of CDR as we go forward. We just dropped a new episode yesterday, which is fascinating. I think it's actually resonates with some of the themes that we're going to discuss today, where we spoke with the principal project organizers of Prisma, which is a really interesting technology platform that applies supercomputing to accelerate the discovery of new carbon capturing materials for direct air capture and other forms of carbon removal. So give that a look. It's really quite fascinating. And then I also have to, just because it is related to today's subject, Megha will drop. We certainly take a look at OpenAir's merch store. We have a number of different t-shirts, but one, which I'm wearing right now, actually our I Square Basalt, which was just produced a few weeks ago. You can see that there. It's got some awesome basalt related statistics on the back, and it is going to come up in today's conversation. So please do give that a look. So we'll move on to today's discussion, which I'm really, really excited for. This is sort of a somewhat different This Is CDR because we are having, a really interesting project in DrawDAO present, but OpenAir is actually going to be collaborating quite closely with DrawDAO this year in ways that we'll describe. So we have the co-founders of DrawDAO, Charles Van Tassel, but we also have Dr. Garrett Boudinot, who is going to actually talk about the project that OpenAir is collaborating with DrawDAO this year, which you'll find out more about in the coming weeks. But he'll give a little background on that, which is called the Carbon Gardener project. And some of you might recognize Garrett because Garrett is a member of OpenAir, a friend of OpenAir, but he was also the second guest that we had 1 year ago on episode 2 of This Is CDR, when he talked about the research he's doing with rock dust, which we'll talk about today. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand it off to my co-host and partner, Megha Raghavan, who will talk a little bit about housekeeping and then introduce our guests. Go ahead, Megha.
Hi everyone, I'm Megha. I am an OpenAir member based in London, and I work on some policy advocacy opportunities out in California where I'm from, as well as This Is CDR and a couple other things. So as usual, housekeeping notes. So as Chris already mentioned, we're going to start with a short presentation on DrawDAO, and then we'll have a quick follow-up from Garrett on the Carbon Gardener side of things specifically. We'll do some prepared questions from Chris and then moderated audience Q&A to end. So please type any questions you have throughout into the Q&A box in Zoom, and make sure you find the one that says Q&A as opposed to chat, just to help us manage the different questions. The event's being recorded as always, so we'll send the video link out to everyone who registered, and we'll also post it on OpenAir's website and our YouTube channel. All right, so today we're joined by Charles Van Tassel, co-founder of DrawDAO, as well as Dr. Garrett Boudinot, who is the technical lead of Carbon Gardener, which is the first and soon to be launched DrawDAO supported initiative. Charles comes to DrawDAO from a background in data science, product development, and the arts. He's a co-founder of the Climate Map, a research nonprofit exploring all the different pathways and methodologies of CDRs, and has worked in climate tech at companies ranging in mission from conscious consumerism to carbon-free energy. Dr. Garrett Boudinot holds a PhD in geological sciences and is one of the world's leading experts in the area of agricultural enhanced weathering practices. Over the last 2 years, as a research associate with Cornell's Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology and College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, Garrett has helped lead pioneering investigations into the carbon removal efficacy of rock dust. This spring, he was selected as an inaugural entrepreneurial fellow at Activate New York, supported by NYSERDA and Columbia University, where he's working to scale up CDR through commercialization. Garrett is the technical lead for the Carbon Gardener initiative in collaboration with the OpenAir community, and proudly the very first project to be supported by DrawDAO later this summer. So presenters, I think Charles, whenever you're ready, the floor is all yours.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for the intro. Hi, everyone. I'm Charles Van Tassel. I'm here representing an organization called DrawDAO, and we're going to bring open sourcing and crowdfunding to the space of carbon dioxide removal and storage. So just to expand on my background a little bit, because I think it's relevant. I'm actually coming from a pretty unconventional background for working in climate tech. I started off in the arts. I actually have a degree in music composition of all things. And, you know, in my early career, I was working at arts organizations in New York City, the New York Philharmonic, the Metropolitan Opera. And that work was great because it satisfied, you know, my creative tendencies, but it became abundantly clear that it wasn't contributing enough to the planet at the time. And climate change is something that has terrified me my whole life, and it's something that I really wanted to work on. So, you know, I brushed up on some of the coding skills that I had obtained through courses in school and through general interest. And I got my foot in the door in the world of climate tech, starting off in a conscious consumerism e-commerce platform, doing machine learning engineering, which was a great start. And it also quickly became abundantly clear that that was not the be-all end-all in terms of solutions to climate change. So at that point, I decided to get involved in some carbon removal interest groups in New York. And I met several really great people who were experts in the field. Actually, OpenAir came and did a presentation at one of those groups. And this is where I met the people who would become the co-founders for the Climate Map, which was a nonprofit that I was working on before this, that they're still around. They're doing great. Actually, they're doing really necessary research in the field. Shout out to any TCM members who might be here today. And the idea there was to get sort of a bird's eye view of all the different methodologies of CDRS. And so, you know, I stayed working on that for a little while. I learned a lot about carbon removal there. And then I decided to explore decarbonization and look at, you know, carbon-free energy, carbon-free electricity. And all those different experiences, I think, have given me a pretty wide view of the space of climate tech. And it's given me a good understanding of the types of problems we face. And I don't think that I need to remind anyone here how necessary carbon removal is or is going to be in the future. And that's really what has driven me to start DrawDAO. as a catalyst for this industry. And what I really wanted was a platform and an organization, a structure that allowed participation from people from sorts of fields and industries. Because I can tell you, as an artist, or at least former artist, there's a lot of people in the arts community who really wish that they could help with climate change, and who feel like they don't have a say, et cetera. And so sort of the founding idea here was to be able to include all types of people in this. And so through that, came to the conclusion that what we really needed here was participation from all these different groups, open sourcing, and some way to get early ideas and early projects off the ground. So that's sort of the genesis of DrawDAO, and that's sort of my background and why I'm doing this and why I want to include the kinds of people that are involved in this. And really quick, before I start the presentation, I want to touch briefly on what a DAO is. Decentralized autonomous organization. And the general principle is that it exists outside of the typical hierarchy of business organizations that have existed in the past. So there is no internal hierarchy. It's a cooperative effort. There are people from all around the world who contribute in various ways. And this is what we're doing at DrawDAO. We're collaborating with experts in the space, scientists, artists, and even a film director who I think is on this call listening today, who's helping us with outreach. So there's a lot of people who are able to contribute in a lot of different ways, and it's great to be able to bring them all together. And that's sort of the purpose. So now let's talk a little bit more about what we're actually doing. Let me start presenting. So as was mentioned, we're DrawDAO. We are creating a product called Carbon Path, which is going to be our open sourcing and crowdfunding platform through which individuals can discover the kinds of projects that we're helping to support. So just starting with the problem. So carbon removal is definitely on the rise. We all know it's necessary. There's good market signals that are making it pretty clear that this is something we need to be doing. And the larger, more established carbon removal projects out there are going to receive funding. The funding is out there for them. They're finding it. It's all good. The bad news is that there are a lot of early stage projects and a lot of people working on early stage projects who sort of reach this valley of death where they're not able to obtain the financing they need to continue on with their projects. And so what you end up with is a whole lot of demand and not nearly enough supply. And one of the ways that we need to address that is by supporting these early stage projects to help them get off the ground. So that's why we're looking at open sourcing and crowdfunding. These are the two things that, in our opinion, the CDR space needs in order to boom. We need open source. We need to open source the methodologies behind the carbon removal and storage in a way that allows everyone to start their own project if they have the means. And secondly, we need to open up funding to the public so that millions of people around the world who want to contribute to these types of solutions to climate change actually have the chance to do so. So this is just a quick preview of what we're building and what this is going to turn into. This is basically going to be a hub, a place for anyone to come together to support these types of projects, either through financial support or through collaboration on open sourcing of methodologies. So this was explained before. We're community project operators, climate activists, scientists, and artists, and we all share this collective goal of carbon dioxide removal and storage. And specifically, we want to catalyze hundreds of new carbon drawdown projects. So how are we going to do this? Starting this summer, the plan is to select several CDRS projects that are in the very early stages. And we want to vet these projects with scientists to make sure that they are additional, plausible, financially feasible, have good co-benefits, et cetera. And then for each one of these projects, the plan is to work with artists to create digital art NFTs to auction and sell and raise as much money as we possibly can for each of the projects. And like I mentioned earlier, we're working with a film director who has good connections to Hollywood. And the plan is to partner with a few celebrities that they're good friends with and promote these projects on an individual basis. So the platform through which this is all going to happen is called Carbon Path. This is where all the crowdfunding and open sourcing efforts are going to happen. Really quick, I want to touch on what this is and what this isn't, because there's currently a good amount of hype in the Web3 space in particular, around refi and around, resale of carbon offsets and how they can be tokenized, how we can raise their value, etc. Carbon Path is aiming to be a platform to crowdfund very early stage projects. And we are not at this time deciding to be a carbon offset provider. It's our position that there currently are not enough quality carbon offsets in existence to meet the demand. And that's one of the things that we are aiming to change and aiming to fix. We want to do this by empowering the ecosystem to unlock the scale necessary to address the challenge at hand. So in our minds, it's investing in future tons of removed carbon, which is the single most impactful way to help us get to where we need to be. So through Carbon Path, what you will see is a directory of early stage carbon removal projects. And each one of these projects, will have information on them, what they're about, where they're located, what their potential scale is, and what their goals are for fundraising. And individual people, pools of people, corporate entities, government entities will all have the opportunity to finance these projects through currency or through cryptocurrency. We want to make it accessible to everyone who wants to participate. So this is not a crypto-only platform. It's not a crypto scheme. This is open to the general public. This is open to everybody, regardless of how much you understand or don't understand about the Web3 space. So another primary objective of this platform is to provide blueprints for the methodologies that the projects we partner with are using to sequester carbon. So this will take the form of sort of procedural how-to documents on how to start your own carbon removal project. If you're somebody with such a propensity, you should be able to find all the information necessary to get started at home and hopefully scale your project and potentially even become a member of the Carbon Path platform and have your own project funded in the future. The idea is to make these blueprints, open source in the traditional sense where, it's accessible by everybody. And we also will be taking revisions and feedback as people experiment and find new efficiencies in the technology. They can share them with the community at large. And this benefits everybody. We're at a stage where we can't be keeping secrets from each other about these technologies anymore. There's just simply not enough time. And it's also one of the main reasons why we partner with the OpenAir Collective, because they have a similar spirit around this. So that's the idea. And then, like I said, in our minds, the future tons of carbon are a lot more impactful for the reason that carbon offsets that have been created in the past are already stale. Now, whether or not that is technically true, it's a very helpful mindset to have when you're going and thinking about, what kind of impact can I have on the future? If you are going and you're buying past carbon offsets, then really what you're doing is you are claiming something. You're making an attributional claim, which is different from a consequential action that you take that has real and true impact on the future. So the best thing you can do to help this space grow and expand right now is to participate in future carbon removal. And that could be, ordering a specific amount of future tons, or more likely in this case, it's just these projects are so early stage. What they really need to be focusing on is scaling and not worrying about the exact number of tons that they're going to remove, which will definitely obviously come with time, but they need to be focused on getting to a point where they're efficient enough that they can be doing this at scale. That's the main thing. So here's another preview of sort of what's coming on that platform. And I want to touch on how we choose our projects. So right now, we're only considering very early stage projects. And this is a collaborative effort. So there's currently nowhere near the amount needed available. And for that reason, we're not concerned about any projects failing due to competition. So we do ask that all of our projects are willing to open source their methodology. And this helps us create our blueprints. It helps everyone in the community to understand the kinds of technologies that we're working with and be able to experiment with them on their own. Each project that we choose to come on our platform will be vetted by a scientific advisor from DrawDAO to ensure net negativity, additionality, durability, positive co-benefits for the environment, et cetera. And we're currently partnering with scientists from Climate Map to vet these applications with us. If this is something that interests you, the full set of criteria can be found on our website, and I have the link down below. So inevitably, there's a few questions that we get pretty often. What about the negative impacts associated with crypto and blockchain? Have you considered the current market conditions for crypto and NFTs, and will you sell carbon credits? I think I've touched enough on will we sell carbon credits, but just to really hit it home, Carbon Path is not intending to be in exchange for carbon credits. The other two are a bit more difficult, a bit more nuanced questions. But in general, it's our view that we are able to have greater impact using Web3 ideas and technologies than we would have traditionally. And I'll definitely take more questions on that in the Q&A session. But I would say high level, that's our stance. So if you're interested in getting involved, if you're a project operator, a marketer, an artist, a legal advisor, a scientist, or just an individual person who cares a lot about climate change, definitely reach out. We have our email address down there, info@drawdao.io, and you can visit our website, drawdao.io as well. And that's it for me for this presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Charles. Really appreciate it. We were really excited by this opportunity. What we thought we'd do, as Charles just indicated, this is a work in progress, and in the coming weeks, you'll get more information. But we thought just to illustrate the types of projects that DrawDAO will be supporting, that we'll share just a little bit of information about the project that OpenAir is involved with, which will be the first one, which is called Carbon Gardener. So Professor Boudinot, Garrett is going to just give a high-level overview of what that is, and then we'll go ahead and get into discussion. So go ahead, Garrett, take it away.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Megha, for y'all's organizing this. And Charles, great to hear about all y'all are doing at DrawDAO. So yeah, as Chris and Megha said, and as you can see on my Zoom box, my name is Garrett Boudinot. I'm a trained geochemist, carbon cycle, and climate scientist. And for the past few years, have been a researcher at Cornell University, working on carbon dioxide removal, specifically in agriculture. So as Chris said, last year I gave This Is CDR talk on the science behind some of that work, and have since been working with Chris and others at OpenAir about how we can leverage OpenAir's network and passion for carbon dioxide removal to advance the science and the scale up of these kinds of solutions. And that was the inspiration of this Carbon Gardener project that I'll just describe at a high level today. So I'll fly through this because, as Chris said, we'll provide more detail in the future, but really want to highlight the opportunities that DrawDAO's initiative that Charles just described is creating, and how we at OpenAir can leverage that towards really open source citizen science approach to carbon dioxide removal scale up. And I saw some chats on this kind of open source aspect being really appealing, but really right off the bat, want to highlight the overlapping values between OpenAir, myself, and what we just heard from Charles about the importance of open access to data, resources, and community involvement in scaling up carbon dioxide removal. So seeing this opportunity from DrawDAO was really exciting for us to join forces and build on those shared values. So the specific approach to carbon dioxide removal we're using for this project is a very sophisticated technical scientific term, rock dust. And the idea is that rock dust can unlock a billion-ton carbon dioxide removal at scale. So if you want to hear more about the science behind this, you can check out my This Is CDR episode from about a year ago. But I'll just provide some context as it relates to this project today. So when we say rock dust, really we mean specifically rocks that are rich in elements like magnesium and calcium. And that's because when these rock dusts dissolve in an environment like soils, they release those elements that changes the pH and thus the carbon chemistry of soils to convert CO2, which could go up into the atmosphere, into stable below ground carbon forms like bicarbonate or carbonate minerals. And I'm showing that here in this diagram. But in my This Is CDR, I describe the science, but then I also highlight the remaining questions that we as a scientific community and as folks who want to see scaled up CDR really need to have addressed. So the first is, how do these different rock dust types influence the rate and amount of carbon dioxide removal? Rocks are geologically and geographically heterogeneous. There's all different ways we can get calcium and magnesium onto soils. How do those different materials impact this process? Second, how do different climates and soil types influence this process, right? Which, if we think about scaling up across the Earth land surface, we've got an incredibly diverse field of settings that this will have to play out in. How will that diversity affect its efficacy? And then finally, how can this be measured? I think Charles touched on this, of just having really reliable carbon dioxide removal credits. Like, how can we measure this consistently across all these settings? And so that was, those three questions was this Carbon Gardener project, really leveraging a citizen science intervention into the existing status quo to accelerate our access to scaling this up, to the science that we need to scale this up. So the way we will deploy this citizen science approach is by working with a network of high schools across the country to really have nodes into all of these different materials, which again are geographically variable, but also the different soils and climates. So the DrawDAO funds for this Carbon Gardener project will empower high school teams to be able to study how this works themselves. And I think there's a lot of opportunities from that I'll get into. Specifically, what they'll do is apply rock dust to some beds, compare it with some beds that don't have rock dust, because high schools around the country have these garden beds readily available, and they'll be able to observe how those different treatments impact the carbon. And they'll do that by sampling soils, waters, and doing some basic analyses around that so that they can see it for themselves. And what's really important about this opportunity is that through the community organizing strength of OpenAir, we can provide resources equally to these schools. So whether that be access to locally sourced rock dust materials, leveraging all the different ways that we can get rock dust around the country, providing support in how to sample and measure this themselves, providing training on how this will work within an education setting, but then also how they can then produce that data reliably so that we can bring it all together and compare across these different settings. And what that will allow us to do is, again, accelerate the scale up of this moving forward, which is really exciting. So there are a few barriers that exist that we really believe that this project will help us overcome. The first is, again, highlighting the importance of data. This is a pretty nascent field of science, even more so in the commercial space. So just providing data of how this works in different settings is going to be really important for making sure that this is effective as a carbon dioxide removal strategy, but also making sure that it's safe as we scale this up rapidly, which is what we want. As I mentioned earlier, one of the big questions is how do we measure this consistently? So having the decentralized approach to studying this in a pretty small scale will allow us to really optimize how the diversity of measurements in these different settings can be done in a way that is robust and provides really reliable data. And that's all for that monitoring, reporting, and verification that we need consistently or consistent for good carbon offsets as a product. And then really important for this, one of the big barriers is just community awareness about carbon dioxide removal itself, which is why things like This Is CDR is so important, but then also specifically around this practice. So engaging communities around the country with the science, with the opportunities, and then again, working that into science education, which we hear from folks all over the country, all over the world, and particularly young people. Okay, we understand the problems with climate change. Where are some solutions? This is an opportunity to put those solutions in our young people's hands, work it into a science education so that we can, again, all as a community, bring this to the table faster. And then finally, just bringing back that open source aspect. Throughout the project, results will be presented on an online, on a website run by OpenAir, but then at the end of the project, all of these results will be assimilated, compared, and then disseminated to those schools so that they can see how their work fit into a larger picture, to the public so that the public can use that information to assess this as a strategy, but also to the scientific community so that the entire world can benefit from the work being done in this project. So again, that's a very high level view of this project, but we could not be more excited to have the opportunity thanks to this support from DrawDAO. And as you heard, I think there are so many overlaps and synergies between the values and the opportunities that OpenAir has through democratizing input into carbon dioxide removal, into advancing the science in a way that involves broad communities, and the values that Charles described about DrawDAO towards those same ends. So really appreciate all of this and looking forward to a good discussion here.
Great. Thank you so much, Garrett. That was really helpful. And again, in the weeks that come, more information about the project will be made available. We'll be having an official launch in the not too distant future, but wanted to give you just a sense of the type of projects in carbon removal that can be supported by DrawDAO. And just to underscore what Garrett said, it's kind of interesting when we think of open source, we often think about hardware or software or gear. And here, what the really critical piece is open sourcing the discovery of how well a relatively low-tech carbon dioxide solution works in a variety of different contexts. And that's the real main barrier, as Garrett was saying, is knowing and characterizing efficacy across a wide range of conditions. And that's what we think this high school-based network is going to enable us to do throughout North America. So really excited to share some information about that in the very near future. So because of time, because we had two presentations, I'm only going to ask really one prepared question. And I was really happy that Charles really started with his story of how what led him to DrawDAO, which is usually actually, those of you who watch regularly know, is usually our first question. But one of the things I want to really raise, and then we'll take audience questions, is Web 3.0, right? And particularly the identity that it has. You sort of spoke to it a bit, Charles, that there's sort of some folks who sort of breathlessly embrace it as sort of the bringing of a new economic era. But understandably, there's a lot of skepticism and worry about certain aspects of Web 3.0, particularly around cryptocurrency. within the environmental community specifically. The nation state level of emissions that crypto mining, the toll that has is enormous. And many of us don't understand for what purpose, what is it exactly? What value are things like cryptocurrency or non-fungible tokens or NFTs really having? And, to be in brief, a lot of people are sketched out by it. And in some ways it looks like the sort of the most almost cartoonishly, out of balance sort of symbol of late capitalism is what someone had sort of said to me. But obviously you're a real climate person. We were introduced from somebody whose climate cred is beyond repute, and you guys see something different. And so I'm interested if you could just sort of speak a little bit to some of the concerns that people have about Web 3.0, but also the long view of how Web 3.0 can be used as a tool to accelerate positive change rather than just what we associate with the sort of the negatives that we see today.
Yeah, sure, Chris. Well, let me tell you, I did not expect things to come to this either. I didn't ask for things to come to this either. For all the Web3 skeptics, all the NFT skeptics out there, I probably agree with you about most things. The fact of the matter is, this is the world we live in right now. And carbon removal is such an important thing that needs to happen that at this point, I think we should be willing to explore using the tools that are available to us. And it is true, it has been proven that NFTs have the ability to move large sums of money very quickly, which is exactly what the CDR space needs right now. And to put it into perspective, Bitcoin is by far the most energy intensive thing on the blockchain right now. And I've seen statistics that say, even so, that uses 50 times less energy than traditional finance. Whether or not that's true, first of all, we're not even really dealing with Bitcoin. We're dealing with NFTs on Ethereum. Ethereum uses 10 times less energy than Bitcoin. And furthermore, there are plans to move to proof of stake, which will be 99.95% more energy efficient overall. And I think I read somewhere it'd be the equivalent of about 2,100 homes in America in terms of energy usage. So all things considered, it's really a drop in the bucket compared to the catalyst and the amount of change that we could possibly put into effect through this sort of open sourcing and crowdfunding initiative. So that's our take on it. I think there's good reason to be very skeptical of Web3 and NFTs and, what's all this hype. That's good. Be careful, do your research. We really just want to do what we can for the CDR community. I also want to say that this is not a Web3 exclusive initiative. Like I said earlier, anybody who is interested in being involved can be. You don't have to buy an NFT to support these projects. You can support through normal USD, normal fiat currency, whatever you have. You can support through contributing to the open sourcing aspect. We really just want to involve everybody, and we don't want there to be barriers.
So it sounds like the focus for DrawDAO is really how do we mobilize resources as quickly as possible, and to the extent that some Web 3.0 tools can be used to facilitate that. Let me just do this though before I move on, because I think that the most controversial, and again, with absolutely good reason, aspect of Web 3.0, you just mentioned to it, this is not Bitcoin that we're talking about, but you mentioned two different terms that are, I think, important to make a distinction if we could. There's proof of work, which is one way of the most energy intensive way of mining crypto and is most closely associated with Bitcoin. And then there's the emerging proof of stake, which is a much lower energy usage. And the Ethereum platform that DrawDAO is going to be working off of is transitioning to proof of stake. I don't know if Matt has joined the call. I know he was having a bit of a schedule tie up, but could you just speak a little bit more to the difference between those two things? Because I think it's really important for people to understand that.
Yeah, for sure. So proof of work is, that's Bitcoin mining's a good example of how that works currently. So it's it's a competition between these miners to solve cryptographic puzzles, essentially. And on average, that uses 5.13 gigawatts of energy. And if you look at that in terms of like locational marginal emissions, 5.3 gigawatts times 1,000 is about the number of pounds of CO2 emissions you're looking at. So that is a lot. Comparatively, proof of stake is like it allocates the verification of transactions between individuals who have a large stake in the currency. So if you have a lot of that currency, then based on how much you're willing to sort of lock up and put away, you'll have a higher chance of verifying a transaction, essentially. And that in comparison uses 2.6-ish megawatt hours. And before I said 5.3 gigawatt hours, now we're talking 2.6 megawatt hours. So that is considerably less energy. So that's a big difference. The Ethereum is moving to proof of stake soon. They had plans to do it this summer. It's looking like it's going to be more this fall. But we're hoping that happens before we, even launch our NFTs.
Great. Well, that's helpful. Why don't we do this? We'll go into I'm going to hand it over to Megha if you're ready. And maybe Megha, to the extent that questions that haven't been answered just now by Charles that relate to what are we talking about? We're talking to Web 3.0. I see there's a number of those. If you think that some of them have been unanswered, maybe we can speak to those a little bit longer.
Yeah, sure. There's a few about that. A couple of them are about sort of how, why NFTs or how that's being implemented. So going with the first one, the person is asking, how are buyers going to be incentivized to buy CDR NFTs, other than having it as a status symbol or exclusivity? What kind of people are you expecting to buy and why? And related to that, what's the difference between someone who wants to buy an NFT versus just go through traditional marketplaces and credits?
Yeah, sure. So the plan is to do the NFT minting and the NFT drop sort of initially as a foundation for the Carbon Gardener project on our Carbon Path platform. And so, if you're interested in buying an NFT, that's where you would go to do it. In terms of the question of incentive, it's for me pretty baffling. I think, like I said, if you're skeptical of NFTs and Web3, I probably agree with you on a lot of things. But it's not something that I am concerned about because, again, it's been proven time and time again that NFTs do sell, and they do move very large sums of money very quickly. So, I think I'm just not concerned about that aspect of this project. And furthermore, if you're someone who doesn't want to buy an NFT, or, worst case scenario, the whole market crashes so much, it's not even worth it to do an NFT drop, God forbid. We do have a plan B. We have a backup. We're still working with these artists. We still would like to auction their art online, and we can do that using fiat currency all the same. And so there's really not a whole lot of difference. The reason we chose NFT is specifically to capitalize on the hype to help the CDR community move forward. So that's the audience that we're hoping to reach. We're hoping to reach a general wide Web3 NFT audience who's used to participating in these kinds of things.
Right. So the idea is there are people who might care about the CDR side of things, but the NFT itself is proven to be. Yeah,
exactly. We don't want to section this off to be only people who care about CDR because we don't think it will be successful that way. Of course, we hope that the people who are interested for NFT reasons find a little bit of education along the way, but really it's just about getting these projects funded.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. And then on the other side of things, I guess we probably have a lot of people here who are not as crypto or Web3 literate. So what kind of next steps should they be looking at if they want to participate and keep up with what you guys are doing?
Yeah, so I mean, if they want to participate, if they want to get really involved, the best thing to do is to email us, check out our website, tell us you're interested. I'm sure that we've got things for you to do. If you're just interested in supporting projects, we will soon be releasing our Carbon Path platform, and you'll be able to find a link to that platform on our DrawDAO website when it's available.
Okay, great. And then we got a question asking a little bit about the sort of organization and structure of the DAO. So could you, what does it mean to be a DAO? What does it mean to be a member? What does your governance look like? So for example, if you fund a project, are you then a member in the DAO, or is there a minimum investment? Are there other steps to go through before you're sort of part of it? Yeah, anything around that?
Yeah, so I mean, candidly, I think like a lot of kind of scrappy early stage DAOs that are starting up right about now, this is continuing to evolve. We're not a huge community right now. We initially wanted to keep it a little bit contained while we worked on sort of getting these projects in the door and vetting these projects. So right now there's sort of like again, not a hierarchy, but there's a core group of people who I think are the most involved in the project. And so we sort of run the operations together, split the tasks evenly. We all do a bunch of different things within the DAO. We have people doing outreach and web development, for example. We have people doing organization and project vetting. And so, so right now it's mostly those core team members, some scientists and some artists, and we're really just trying to work together as cooperatively as we can at this point. We do have we do vote on the projects that come through, and it's a unanimous process. So we have to work through things until we have a unanimous decision. So for example, everybody agreed on the Carbon Gardener project to be our first project. In terms of, can you become a DAO member if you contribute? I think absolutely there's a potential for that. We've definitely talked about opening up our community much wider once we have our Carbon Path platform released.
Okay, cool. And then how do projects kind of get selected? Is there like a treasury that manages that? Do people vote if they're part of the DAO? Or what's the system for that?
Yeah, so we have our projects, they submit their applications through email, and then the application gets distributed within the DAO. Everybody reviews it, and everybody has an opportunity to cast a vote, which is done pretty informally at the moment. So that process is not yet on chain. It will be in the future. And then, like I said, it has to be unanimous, and we have to talk out anything we don't agree on.
Okay, cool. We got a couple of questions about the open sourcing aspect. So how do you balance all the benefits that you get out of open source and kind of the advantages there with startups potentially needing to protect their IP or wanting to protect their IP as they get started?
Yeah, sure. We've definitely, we've talked to a lot of projects, and we definitely find some who say they're not interested because they don't want to open source. And that's fine. That's their decision. I would say overall, we've talked to way more projects who are actually willing, believe it or not. I think within the space of CDR, there is a spirit of cooperation. There's more than anything else, a sense of urgency. And I think I said this earlier, but we're just really not concerned about projects failing due to competition. It's a lot more about execution and implementation. The demand is so high and the supply is so short right now that everybody would benefit. If you have a project and you discover some technology or some efficiency that makes the entire CDR process so much better, that's something you need to share with the world, not keep to yourself at this point in time. We're pretty firm in our belief about that, and we actually find the most people we talk to share that belief.
Okay, great. I'm going to do one last question before handing this back over to Chris to close things up. How do you see the DrawDAO crowdfunding model and your whole methodology interacting with other things in the CDR startup ecosystem? So, incubators, impact investors, the Frontier Fund, X Prize, things like that. What's kind of the unique role of DrawDAO, and where do you sit within those?
Yeah, I mean, we love all of those things. The very last thing we want to do is prevent any of our projects from future financing in any way. So, the projects that we partner with, some of them are research projects, so they're not even, really in the race for some of those things, but still incredibly necessary things that need to happen. Carbon Gardener is a great example. And so we don't stake a claim in the project. We don't ask for equity or anything like that. In fact, we hope that we're able to catalyze these projects enough that they're able to pursue all of those things in the future once they reach some initial funding goal. And we would be more than happy to support them in those efforts.
Okay, great. We did get one other question, which I'm just going to quickly address, which is how many schools is the Carbon Gardener project targeting? So it depends on the funding that they managed to get through the DrawDAO NFT raise, but the target is 100. So anyone here who's interested in supporting that should definitely check it out. And Charles and Garrett, thank you so much. This has been great, and I'd love to see the open source approaches to all of these things. Really appreciate you guys being on. And Chris, back to you.
Thank you, Megha. And I want to thank Megha, who's in London right now in the sweltering heat. As you can tell, she has a fan blowing her face. So thanks for holding it together and not dehydrating before our eyes. So well done, Megha. Charles and Garrett, that was excellent. And again, I really want to stress is from an OpenAir perspective, this is really just the very beginning. So in the coming weeks, we will be presenting our own content and ways for our community and beyond our community to participate in Carbon Gardener. 100 schools is the target in every region of the country. Regional diversity is key because, again, that's how we get the richest, most diverse data. So we are going to be working with our network to recruit schools. So really, really excited to share more information about that as we get into it. So just a couple of notes on what comes up next. We got an awesome summer continuing programming for This Is CDR. Next week, we have an incredibly cool project, which I wish I was smart enough to do justice to describing, but climate robotics, really interesting use of AI and automation intersecting with carbon dioxide removal to reduce cost and energy. So we're going to have the CEO, Jason Aramburu, is going to be joining us for that next week. So please do join. I know Megha through the registration link in there. And then we have a couple of other great programs as well. After climate robotics, we have Project Carb Down. And then we also have Carbion, which is going to be August 9th. That is a really cool and interesting direct air capture company based in the Netherlands. And that is it. And again, folks, please do. I'm going to leave the Zoom on for just a few minutes because I know a lot of links were dropped. So if people do want to record those. But I do want to stress, please do join the OpenAir community. We're growing every day and every week, and really interesting things are happening inside, and they'll only become more interesting with the more people who join. So please do jump in. And thank you, everybody. And thank you to our guests. And we'll see you next week.